Our guest today innovated his way into innovation. Halfway through his 15-year tenure at Accenture, while co-leading the company's business process re-engineering practice focused around business efficiency, he realized he no longer wanted to be responsible for people losing their jobs. So he did exactly the opposite by building Accenture's thriving 20,000 person process and innovation practice focused on growth and job creation. Since then, he's gone on to write 7 books, has become a Hall of Fame speaker, and so much more. He cultivates innovation by showing leaders and their teams how to approach, tackle, and solve their business challenges. He's able to see what others cannot, opportunities to improve innovation models and the cultures that support them. And so, without further ado, Steven Shapiro, welcome to the podcast.
Hey, good to see you, Simon.
Good to see you too. Look, we've known each other for some time and there's plenty we could talk about. But for today, as I just mentioned, you've written 7 books and one of them, your 7th, which is called Pivotal, Creating Stability in an Uncertain World, just launched. So first of all, congratulations on book number 7.
Thank you.
And I think, I've been reading this, and thank you for sharing a copy with me whilst I waited for my pre-order copy to turn up in the post ahead of today. What struck me about it, and I've followed you very generously teasing and sharing bits of the creation of this book online as you were writing it, is that Pivotal takes a somewhat contrarian view on innovation, focusing on what's now, as you put it, before getting on to what's next. So could you start with just telling us a little bit to the background of the book? Why is it called Pivotal, and what do you hope your readers will take away from it?
Sure. So we called it Pivotal. And I'll tell you, titles are the most difficult part of a book, in my opinion. Writing them, selling them, that's easy compared to a good title. And, with Pivotal, what I realized was in particular during the pandemic, but even prior to that, organizations were so focused on changing and shifting, and the pandemic hit. And then all of a sudden, we can't go to a restaurant, so we need to change the way we interact with our customers. And, it's not safe to fly or stay in hotels, so what are we going to do to make it safe? And it was just, in the year 2020, pivot was the word of the year, and it hasn't stopped. And then you have supply chain issues, and you have inflationary challenges, and then now you've got AI. There are more opportunities than ever. And so when I worked with my clients over the past, 4, 5, 6 years in particular, I saw almost fear in their eyes. I mean, they were uncertain what they should do next, because when there are thousands of opportunities, the reality is many of them are distractions. And so I wanted to find a way of helping companies figure out what's most important to their organization so they have perfect clarity on where to invest, so that this spinning out of control will stop. And that's really the essence of being pivotal. Is the definition of pivotal is you are of crucial importance. That is, your customers couldn't survive without you. Your employees just couldn't do without you. So when you're pivotal, you're not pivoting, you're actually providing as much deep value as you possibly can. So that's sort of the essence of the book and how it came about.
Amazing. We started this whole podcast season off, and the podcast is called Total Innovation, with Aidan McCullen, and we explored with Aidan the roots of my thinking around total innovation in terms of sport and business coming together. It feels like, and I've seen some of your online stuff around this, that there's a bit of a sports analogy in your thinking here around the pivot. Do you want to talk a little bit to that for our Total Innovation podcast listeners?
Sure. So I live in Orlando, Florida, which is the home of Mickey Mouse and other great theme parks, but it also is the home of our basketball team, the Orlando Magic. And I've had the great opportunity of working with them over the years. And as I was writing this book, what I realized was when you watch a basketball player pivot, basically what it is about a foot moving around in circles. But what most people don't realize is that although most eyes are focused on the foot that's moving, it's the changes, the shifts. When we talk about pivoting, it's about what's changing. Nobody's really ever looking at the foot that doesn't move, the foot that's planted. Without that foot, you don't have a pivot. You're just sort of meandering. And what I've realized is most companies have focused way too much on the moving foot and not on the power of the planted foot. And that's really, this book is all around how can we figure out how to build a solid foundation, that planted foot for your organization that gives you stability, gives you clarity, but at the same time does give you a powerful position to pivot from when needed, but you don't start with the pivot, you start with the planted foot.
So how do organizations start to figure out where that depth should be and where that planted foot is, if they don't already know? Like, what is the starting point for getting your head around this, which sounds like a brilliant concept? And I do like this contrarian view of the world is crazy, everything feels like it's the trends are the trends are the trends, and they just keep moving, and trying to figure out where to prioritize needs that stability, right? But is it something that's abundantly obvious to people? You just got to stop and think, or what are the approaches that you explored in figuring out what that planted foot looks like?
So I have a mantra that I've used for actually decades now, and this book really is built around that. And it's innovate where you differentiate. The problem is most organizations don't have a clear understanding of their differentiator. They think a differentiator is being different, and it is not. It's actually made up of 5 different components, which we could delve into if we want. And so the key is, though, if we can get 100% clarity on our differentiator, and every person in our organization understands how they contribute to that differentiator, we get a major multiplier effect of the organization because we're investing in the areas of the business that have the greatest impact. So when you innovate where you differentiate, that is your planted foot. That's where you start to double down. And anything that's not a differentiator, you find different strategies for those, but you don't try to create the world's greatest payroll system unless you're a payroll company. And that one's obvious, but there's so many examples of companies that are investing in technologies and processes and capabilities that aren't really going to be worthwhile investments.
Yeah, because they're not the right company to do it, or it's not the right market for them to be operating in. What are those 5 components? Let's double click on that. I think it's worth you
Sure.
teased on it a bit, so let's go there.
So the first 2 Ds, so they're the 5 Ds of differentiation. The first 2 Ds are around today. So you need to make sure you have both of these working together in concert today. And so the first one is being distinctive. And distinctive is sort of the different and differentiated. So it means it is something which helps us stand out. It's something which we do that someone else doesn't do. And I want to be clear when I say distinctive, it tends not to be distinctive products, services, or offerings. It tends to be distinctive capabilities that allow us to create new products, services, and offerings as needed. So we have to have distinctive capabilities. And then the second D is desirable. And desirable means that the world must want it and the organization must be benefiting from it also. And I see a lot of companies who get so focused on, we're going to do something new and different, but they're creating something the world doesn't value, they don't crave. And that's not going to be something which is differentiated. And in some cases, they create things that are desirable, but they're me too. They're just an also ran, and so they're not going to be standing out. So those first 2 are really fundamentally critical. And with the desirable part, we go really, really deep in the book. The second 2 Ds are around the future. So if we're going to be distinctive today, well, what's going to keep us distinctive in the future is our ability to be durable. And that basically means our capabilities have to be something which someone couldn't replicate. If we develop something, whether it's a product, service, or even a capability that others could replicate quickly, then we're basically doing the hard work for our competition. And then in order to stay desirable in the future, we need to be dynamic, which is the 4th D, which is really about the pivoting. So once we have those first 3 Ds, we have that planted foot, and now we can be dynamic and change direction when needed. And the 5th D is all around leverage, which is how do we leverage our differentiator to get the greatest impact? And there's 2 parts of that, and it's all around being disseminated. You want to disseminate internally, and you want to disseminate externally. The first thing is you need to make sure every person in your organization understands your differentiator, and they understand how they personally contribute to the differentiator, how their team contributes to the differentiator. And once you have that and everybody inside the organization is doing that, then you want to leverage it externally. You want to disseminate your differentiator externally. And there's a whole cool body of work we have around that type of concept.
So I think it's a nice structure. There's a lot of good frameworks out there. So maybe get a little bit practical, right? I teased you in the in the intro to this, I like to try and get practical. So is there a real world example maybe we could drill into on these Ds, either from stuff that you've done or other case studies that sort of make it tangible to people?
Sure. So we'll just start off with distinctive, because I think it's a good place to start. And probably my favorite story, and in fact, when people have read early releases of the book, this is one of their favorite stories, which is a company called Radio Flyer. Now, here in the US, they're known for their red wagons. And the company's been around, I think, since like 1917 or something like that. And they make wagons. They make little red wagons. It's a commodity item. Yet, people love this company. They are thriving. And the reason is because Robert Passon, who is like one of the great grandchildren, or whatever it is, of the original founder, he goes around and he asks people about Radio Flyer. And what's so amazing is every time, and I've done the same thing, when you ask people, hey, did you have a Radio Flyer when you were younger? He said the first reaction is always the same. They break out into a big smile. And then they don't tell stories of the wagons, but they tell stories about a magic carpet, or it was a rocket ship and the wind blowing through their hair. I just talked to somebody the other day who was actually one of their major centerpieces for their Christmas ornaments, and they put lights on it. And it was like these great memories. And so for them, they've realized their differentiator isn't the product. It's rarely the product, but it is actually their ability to bring smiles and joy to people. And everything they do, when they designed their first store in Chicago, it was all designed around the principle of how do we bring smiles at every moment when someone thinks about and interacts with the company. And they've just done it brilliantly. So I think that's one of my favorite stories about being distinctive, because anybody can create a wagon, but not everybody can create smiles.
Which is nice, actually, because I think you even told it you told the D story in this way that I was envisaging that being the very foundational piece of all of this, right? Like, you've got to figure out what's that distinctive bit, as you said. If you don't have that, the foundations are sand, and you can't go anywhere else. Very helpful. So you mentioned earlier that everyone needs to have to contribute to this, and we're very philosophically aligned on this, right? Innovation isn't a job for an individual or a team. It's a capability that exists. I'm not even convinced it's a team, actually. In most organizations, you may need a team for a period of time, but it's not necessarily a team for forever. How does everyone contribute, and what are the frameworks that we might be thinking around in terms of the various roles that people can play in helping the business to set these foundations and then execute effectively on them as well?
So there are some cultural indoctrinations that you might say that you need to do. I mean, people, you need to communicate, you need to have conversations, you need to share. Like, unfortunately, what happens is when you think about a differentiator, it tends to be something which the top executives know, but it's rarely communicated and cascaded down. So the first thing is to understand there are certain models that you use to be able to cascade those. And I'll give you one company which I really like that has done this brilliantly for decades. And it is a company called Koch Industries, Koch, out of Wichita, Kansas, here in the United States. And they're in very complex and, in many cases, dangerous industries: paper, pulp, petrochemicals, oil, gas. And I remember them telling me a story a number of years back how when they wanted to improve their safety record, they were average, they weren't bad, but safety was something they really valued. The first thought was, okay, we need more safety inspectors. Now, this is going to build exactly on what you just said, Simon. But they realized more safety inspectors goes exactly the opposite of having it be part of everybody's responsibility. So they actually got rid of the safety department and said safety is now every person's responsibility. Each and every person in this organization is going to be incentivized to either find safety issues or to rectify safety issues, and you will get money and compensation and other things when you find those. And by shifting away from safety is the responsibility of a few people to safety is everyone's responsibility, they cut the number of accidents down by 50% the first year, and they cut them down by an additional 50% the second year, and they were one of the best in class safety records for their industries by using this mindset. And so we need to recognize that every person can contribute to safety. Every person can contribute to innovation. And every person needs to understand how they contribute to their differentiator, no matter what they do, no matter what department they are in. And I've gotten some great stories about companies that have done some really cool things with parts of the business that you wouldn't think are differentiators, but they've actually made a huge difference.
Which might be worth drilling into actually, but I was gonna. Some of this narrative led me off into a sort of mind process around language, which I think you and I probably chewed over in the past as well. But safety is something that everyone can. I say the word safety to you. I say it to my 7-year-old daughter. She knows what it means. I say the word innovation to her or to lots of people, and it's not always well understood, right? And so, I do like the concept of this differentiator, but again, it's quite a hard thing for lots of people to get their heads around, right? That distinctive piece has to come from the top. It has to come from the leadership. So how do you see that? How do you see that playing out, both in terms of helping people to understand what it is that is expected of them, right? Where is this distinctive piece? How do I play my role in everything from, the traditional markets we serve and the existing capabilities we've got through to whatever this business might be in the future, right? That whole arc of innovation. How do we make that more accessible to everybody? Because if we're gonna do this properly, we've got to achieve that, right?
Absolutely. And I think, it comes down to, like you said, it's language, and language is important. So if we want people, the biggest problem companies have made with innovation over the past 20 years, they say, I want everybody to innovate. That makes no sense because nobody, as you just said, understands what it means. So we need to translate, what does innovation mean to us as an organization specifically, clearly, and articulate that and communicate that. The same thing with our differentiator. Now, I would argue that once you understand your differentiator, innovation becomes clear. Because if we can clearly articulate how we differentiate, coming back to Radio Flyer, they're very clear that their differentiator is to put smiles on every person who buys a product or interacts with the company. So if that's the case, if you're the person answering phone calls, your measure of success is not a sale. Your measure of success is, did I make them smile? Did I make them feel good? Did I bring them joy today with that interaction? It's very different than most companies where it's a transaction. They build relationships and feelings and emotions. So we need to get that level of clarity so it can be communicated. And I will say that what's important is, although the organization has a differentiator, that needs to cascade down. So teams, departments, and functions all need to understand what is their unique differentiator and how does it contribute to the organization's overall differentiator. And then we need to bring that down to individuals. There's a whole section in the book on how do we become pivotal as individuals, whether it's an employee, as an entrepreneur, or even in our lives. How do we have pivotal lives? And that, again, comes down to the clarity. And if you're an employee, you need to understand what your unique capabilities are, the things that you do better than anyone else, those 5 Ds. What do I do as an individual that helps my team do what it does best to help the organization do best? And again, we provide a bunch of different models for that cascading, but it's you have to have that level of clarity and communication for any of this to work.
One of the topics I think that's covered quite well in the book is, and it's all sort of linked to this craziness of there's a million things coming at us that are new and that we have to react to, is the burnout and confusion, right? Like the feeling that individually, teams, everything about the business can just feel so chaotic that modern workplaces will often struggle with this. And this idea of constant change is the thing that you're really tackling. So how do you reflect on that, and how can you bring order to the chaos by adopting the things that you're outlining in the book?
So I think the key with all of this is that stability comes not from eliminating uncertainty or increasing predictability. We can't predict the future. I've got friends who are futurists, and they might have some probabilistic models that are going to help us understand where we might go, but we can't predict the future. So all we can do is look at, what can we do today? What's it that we can do today better than anyone else that will stand the test of time, and make sure that every person, when they look at the work that they are doing, the reason why people are burning out, first of all, is they're getting conflicting and changing instructions. One day this is our priority, the next day it's a different priority. We've got this new technology yesterday, now we've got a new one today. So that's part of the burnout. And when we can give people clarity, around what is most important, where they should be innovating, where they differentiate on their daily work, we eliminate that burnout. We get much greater clarity, we get much greater stability, and we get everybody moving in the same direction. And it's the time for us to realize that we can't be chasing the next bright, shiny object. Because as fun as AI is to deal with today, there's going to be something else that comes down the line, or it's going to be AI version 2 that's going to be totally different than what we have today. So I think we need to just recognize there are some things that will change, but what's most important for us is to recognize for our organization, what is that should stand the test of time that won't change? What is the thing that we need to do now that creates the greatest opportunities rather than focusing on distractions and the next thing that comes our way?
So on that theme, how can businesses distinguish between genuine opportunities and distractions or fleeting fads then, do you think?
So the 5Ds are one, because if you can get clear on again, these aren't products, these are capabilities we build that are going to stand the test of time and that people value. That's the first place. And the second thing is to recognize, I'll give you the shortened version of one of the frameworks, and I'll talk about all three levels just so people understand. So everything that every person in your organization does falls into one of three categories. And I want to be clear, these are activities. These aren't jobs, roles, peoples, departments. These are activities. And every person in every department does a combination of all three. The first level are support. These are the ones that create internal value, but don't create external value. We need them to run the business, but our customers really aren't paying us to have the world's best payroll system. It's the next two levels that are more interesting, though, and it's core versus differentiating. Core are the table stakes. These are the entry points. This is what is expected. If you get these wrong, it's not why core is never the reason somebody's going to do business with you, but if you get it wrong, it will be why somebody leaves you. So if you're in the hotel industry, having a clean room, having working Wi-Fi, having good food, those types of things are just core. I've never heard somebody say, I'm going to stay at this hotel because they have Wi-Fi or they don't have bed bugs or whatever it is. But if you don't have those working the way they should work, you're going to lose people pretty quickly. So you have to ask yourself, what is core? What is differentiating? It's important to distinguish that because, and I'll just use AI for an example right now. Most companies have shifted their strategy to AI so much that they've taken their eye off their differentiator. AI, unless you are an Accenture, my alma mater, or a company that is investing billions of dollars into AI, understanding it and how to leverage it, unless you're one of those companies, for most of you, AI is just going to be core. It's an expectation. Your products and services and offerings have to have AI, but they're not going to work with you because you have it. They just might not work with you if you don't have it. So if that's the case, your strategy isn't to innovate around your core. It isn't to innovate with AI. It's to find the people who already are masters at AI, work with them, partner with them, bring in some proven practices and try to leverage it. But it's not trying to be the world's best AI company. It's to leverage AI so you can do what you do best better than anyone else.
Do you think that innovators listening to this are going to, or how should they view this as but Stephen's just talking about really just focusing on the core then, this planted foot, everything else, and I'm constantly fighting my business to not just do that, right? To sort of push the boundaries, take a few more risks, let me be more experimental in the things that I'm doing. And this messaging my leaders might perceive this as, okay, we must continue doing what we're doing and not take as many risks. Like how should it be received, and why is that not quite the right lens to hear this through?
Yeah, that's a great point. When people hear what doesn't change, look, what doesn't change doesn't mean you're standing still. So it is really about how do we deepen our relationship with our customers and our clients? Because if we go deeper, we're still changing, but we're not changing direction. We're not dissipating our energy. We're actually focusing our energies. So for example, one of the early titles of this book, Innovate Where You Differentiate, was an early one. Another one was called Divot, which is a golf term. And I love that term, but nobody really got it. And the point was that it's a deep pivot. It's like that going deep. So for example, one of the things which I realized is I kept on thinking for almost 15 years that I'm a professional speaker, but I'm not. I'm an innovation expert who delivers speeches, but I also deliver content and help create and transform companies. And when I made that shift from being a speaker to being a person who provides depth in the area of innovation, well, it totally changed the products I created without changing the capabilities that I had. I still went deeper into my differentiator, but it wasn't about standing still. It was about going deep.
Yeah, I saw that initially. I think you touted a few of those online as well. And as a golfer who's laid more than a few divots, I definitely understood what you were talking about. But I think I like the metaphor in Pivotal, and the pivot idea, particularly from the software space where pivoting is quite well known, and it's a nice play on words, semantically around that as well. What is the impact on leadership then within all of this? I asked the question around innovators might be thinking, well, don't read this as just focus on the core, but leaders have obviously got to lead effectively around this. So what role does leadership play in creating this stable foundation, but also affording their teams the right places to then go and do the good work that has to build the value and build those customer relationships with on top of those foundations?
Yes. So the leadership has to basically pour the cement. It has to, get that stable foundation so that everybody can build the house on top of it. And we can change the house and renovate the house and add, new rooms. We can do it, but we still have a foundation. And unfortunately, most companies, the leaders haven't given enough clarity. And again, clarity doesn't mean restricting people. Clarity just means this is the direction we're going. And we can veer off a little bit, but when we do, we need to understand the implications of that. So the key thing for a leader is to create that stable foundation. The way you do that is to have clarity around your differentiator and to then communicate that, to disseminate it to every person in the organization. So if every person understands how they contribute and every team, department, and function understands how they contribute to the differentiator, then you get leverage. And that's really, I think that the key with all of this is to make sure we're doing that, is letting people do what they do best and helping the organization move forward that way.
So do you think most people inside most organizations would know what their differentiator is and what that distinctive differentiator is, in particular from leaders down? I'm also curious because I think a few of the examples we've given around this today have been quite consumer goods oriented. So getting into, I don't know, the B2B parts of the value chain or whatever. I assume that this applies through in there as well. But that je ne sais quoi of what is that distinctive differentiator, is that well understood?
So I love the fact that you brought up B2B, because that is actually some of my favorite uses of the concepts. So let me answer the first half of the question, which is, do most companies know what their differentiator is? And I found that they know what their mission, their vision, and things of that nature are, but they don't necessarily know their differentiator. They don't think in these terms. Or if they do have a sense of what their differentiator is, it's typically not correct. Sometimes it's a technology. I remember working with a major, won't even say the industry, but it was a major industry, and they were convinced this one technology they developed was their differentiator. And I was like, I guarantee you within 6 to 9 months, your competition is going to do what you did, and they're going to do it better. And it's exactly what happened. And so what was, in their opinion, their differentiator was actually something which became an albatross because they put too much money in it and it wasn't the right thing to invest in. But they realized in their cases, it was all around their service culture. And again, the details don't matter. So let's go to B2B for just one quick second here, because this is when we talked about disseminating externally. Here's what's really great is if you can master the process that I talked about and you can understand your differentiator, if you're a B2B company and you have a conversation with your clients and customers, if you can better understand what is support, core, and differentiating for them, and if your differentiator as a service provider lines up with their core or their support, now you have the best selling point you can have, because you can tell people, when you work with me, I'm going to help you innovate where you differentiate, and we will take the core and support off the table for you. And these conversations have been transformational during the sales process. So you want to innovate where you differentiate, but you also want to sell where you differentiate. And ideally, where you're selling is into someone else's core or support.
Yeah, that's a really nice way of framing it together. And the book does a good job of going deep on this as well. As I start to bring us to a close on this, you mentioned earlier that this can apply to the individual as much as to the team or the organization. So in terms of that stability and personal development, how can individuals apply this concept of depth and stability to their personal growth and career development?
It really comes down to, I mean, if you, what I think about are sort of the first three Ds. So I think about, what do I do that nobody else does? I mean, like, what makes me distinctive as an individual? What do I internally desire? That is, what do I love to do? Something that really gets me jazzed up. What is the world value that I do? And how is it that I can offer something that others couldn't replicate? And when you get those pieces together, you end up with a pretty stable foundation, because you're doing something you love, you're doing something the world values, you're doing something that nobody else can do and nobody else could ever copy you. And that's how we become valuable or pivotal as an employee. It's how we become pivotal in our lives, is making sure we're doing the things that we love to do that are going to have the greatest impact.
Here, which I know we're doing every day, right? And the things that we're working on ourselves.
Exactly.
So aside from encouraging people to go pick up the book, which I definitely do, and I'm assuming they can pick that up at all good booksellers, as I know I ordered mine online. Where can people find you, and what else would you like them to know about you? You know, I think that you're not just an author; you're a lot more than this, right? I think your keynotes are phenomenal. But where can people find you? Where can they find out more about you if they want to connect with you?
Sure. So, I mean, steveshapiro.com is certainly the easiest place, or you can go to The Innovation Speaker. You don't have to worry about spelling all my name. So The Innovation Speaker will take you to the same place. But the thing which I'm enjoying the most right now is when I do the transformational work with my clients through my Fast Innovation Mastery program. And that's, if you go to fastinnovationmastery.com, basically that is an apprenticeship program I've developed where I take people inside of a company and we go deep into my process. We use that cascading model that I talked about, and we create a group of masters, the people who are going to be deep, deep, deep practitioners in the concepts, who then bring in the ambassadors, which is the next level. And then we start cascading it further down into the organization. And it's just incredibly powerful to see the results we're able to produce.
Well, Stephen, thank you very much. I know this book is not just a labor of love, but it's based off of many years of actual applied experience that you're now bringing to help people to, as you put it, innovate where they differentiate. I think there's a lot of great concepts in there. It is like everything in this topic, right? It's an applied piece. You got to put the time in to really think about these things. I think the structures you've got in there, the support core differentiating, the 5Ds and everything are nice, easy, accessible things. And thank you very much for giving us a little bit of time today to walk through them. And as I said, I actively encourage people to go pick this book up and check out Stephen's work. Thank you again, Stephen.
Thank you, Simon.